welcome to Off My Shelves. In this episode we are going to be looking at Monster by Naoki Urasawa, volumes 1 to 9 of the Perfect Edition. So let's get underway. So for me, Naoki Urasawa lives up against, those Alan Moores, those Grant Morrisons, the leaders in the field of kind of manga or comics or sequential art, however you want to phrase it. But genuinely, he is one of these authors that I was so glad that I discovered, because his storytelling is always right up my street. He always paints this very mysterious world of intrigue and twists and turns, and he clearly loves constantly teasing and keeping mysteries mysterious right the way through his runs, and Monster is one of those ones that follow suit, really. This is exactly like 20th Century Boys and Pluto's, in the fact that it starts off with a mystery and it keeps giving more mysteries on top of more mysteries on top of more mysteries on top of more mysteries, until you are just totally enthralled and you just want answers. It just keeps you wanting more and more and more, I think. But before I get into the story of Monster, let's look at the bills of these Perfect Editions. They all come in paperback. They're slightly bigger than your normal tankobon size. They're the Viz Signature Edition, so they're a little bit bigger than tankobons. They all come with a nice thick cover with French flaps, and they've got this almost tracing paper like see-through front page. This lets you see through to a colour page on the start of each volume. Each book is about 450 pages long. They are 2 volumes in one, if I'm remembering that right. And so originally they were 18 volumes, and now they've been condensed into these 9. And this is the complete story of Monster. And on that, let's get to the story. The story starts off following Dr. Tenma, who's a Japanese doctor in Germany, and he is a genius in his field, really. An expert surgeon, really at the top of his field in every level. And he's almost kind of given a lot of his best years over to the head of surgery, his fiance's father, writing reports for him, making him look good, and generally kind of serving him a lot more than the other way around, really. But straight away he's kind of met with this ideology that you either work for the hospital's benefit or the patient's benefit. And what I mean by that is the head of surgery and his fiancée genuinely believe that some lives are worth saving and some lives not. They best prioritise to save the important people, the people who will bring good repute to the hospital and things like that. And this type of mentality and ideology leaves Dr. Tenma very uncomfortable. And that ideology of some lives are worth saving more than others is something that he makes a decision on, and that really influences every single part of the story going forward, really. Now keep in mind, this is set in the 80s, so the Berlin Wall is still up at the start of the story. It's about to come down, but essentially there is a family that's defected from the Russian side of the Berlin Wall, and they've come over, but they've come over with 2 children, and 1 daughter, 1 son, and they're twins. And you were caught up with them because the mother and father have been murdered, and the boy has been shot in the head, and the daughter is traumatised beyond belief, and she doesn't know what's happened. So she's more or less in a waking coma, really. She can't respond verbally to anything that's going on. She's really traumatised by it. But the boy is rushed into hospital, and then all of this one life is worth saving more than other mentality and ideology comes to a front in Dr. Tenma's mind, because he's given the decision of either treating the mayor or high-ranking politician who's come into the hospital at the same time as this boy, or treating that boy. Now, the boy came in first, and he started, but he was told by the head of surgery to go on to this other guy, but he refused. He said, no, I'm going to stay with this patient. And it basically ruins his medical career. And the murder and everything is getting headlines, and so they see a PR campaign, and so they take the patient off Dr. Tenma. It backfires on them because they are given poisoned sweets. Now the sweets are poisoned and 3 doctors die, and then the boy goes missing and the girl goes missing. No one knows what happened, and no one knows where the twins have gone, and it's all very mysterious. You catch up with Dr. Tenma several years later then, when he is, the head of surgery, because all these other people died. But in those years later, when the Berlin Wall has come down and all that type of thing, he is then approached by the boy, who's grown more into a man now and is going by the name of Johan. And he realises that it was Johan who actually poisoned the sweets and killed those people, and Johan actually murders another person in front of him. And now Dr. Tenma's left with this catastrophic guilt and sense of responsibility because he actually saved this boy's life. He wouldn't exist to have taken these lives if he didn't give him his life back by treating him. And so he's racked with guilt and he feels like he needs to do something about Johan. But just as he starts to do something, he is framed for murdering those people by poisoning the candy back several years before, and then he becomes a hunted man, a fugitive. And the more the story builds, the more Dr. Tenma is met with this contradiction. The fact that he's saving life day to day, that he's trained to save lives, but now the only way he can actually see and envisage to stop Johan and his killing spree is to kill him. And so he's constantly fighting with that mentality within himself internally that he's hardwired to save lives, but the only way he can actually see to end this situation and to save lives is by taking a life. And so he's got a lot of internal conflict. But Monster goes forward, and the more you go forward, the more is revealed about Johan. But it's revealed because Dr. Tenma himself is chasing his trail throughout Germany and other countries, trying to find out who he is, where he came from, and he quickly realises that Johan isn't his real name. And so he keeps investigating, coming into contact with other people, but all the while he's almost dancing to the tune of Johan. Johan knows where he's going, he knows the directions he's taking, and he's kind of guiding Dr. Tenma, playing with him almost. And so Dr. Tenma is literally always on the back foot with this maniacal genius of a serial killer always in front of him, murdering and killing people and concocting a plan that is so devious and so out there that a normal thinking person could never really come up with it in the context of the book, really. The places the monster goes to, you wouldn't really see coming at all, because as soon as you were introduced to Johan, you think he's one thing, and then they introduce other elements like what happened to him when he was in orphanages and things like that, and how secret government organisations have done experimentation and things on him and changed the whole direction of his life. But even before that experimentation started happening, other things were happening in his life. And so you're almost, as you're going forward, you're piecing together Johan's life in the hope of trying to figure out who he is and how to stop him. But equally, in the present day, Dr. Tenma is always on the back foot, trying to stop these murders from happening and trying to stop himself being caught by the police, who won't believe this bizarre story of a child poisoning candy to kill his victims off. It is a story that twists and turns at every point. I will say this about Naoki Urasawa's work, is if you don't like being teased, and what I mean by that is if you're introduced to a mystery and then when you get the answer to that mystery, it's another mystery, so teasing you, then you're not going to like practically any of Naoki Urasawa's work at all, really, because all of them are of that same vein and of that same creation. They all lay down these formations of the story, but then twist and turn. Every time you think you're close to an answer, a new mystery is introduced, and it keeps you on the edge of all of these mysteries, of all of these answers, right till the very end. He has this amazing ability to diverge away from the main characters, so Dr. Tenma and Johan, and tell a totally different story, which will eventually come back to that main thread of those two main characters. And that happens quite frequently throughout this book. You look at, investigators' lives, and from journalists' lives, from politicians' lives, from wealthy benefactors' lives. You go off in all these different directions, but then all of them come back. And coincidence is a big thread throughout most Naoki Urasawa books as well. And you have to realise as well, to a certain degree, is that you're only introduced to a lot of these characters because they will eventually become part of the main story of Dr. Tenma and Johan. They will connect up. You're not introduced to these people at random, even though it feels like it sometimes. Like when you turn the page or open the book and you suddenly follow in this millionaire in his late 70s and you haven't got a clue how this is actually going to tie back. But then when you go forward, you realise that it's a pivotal part of the plot connecting back to Johan's origins. You realise that the only reason he's introduced in the first place is to bring back the story to Johan or to bring back the story to Dr. Tenma. I love Urasawa's artwork as well. A lot of people complain that a lot of the faces are similar and things like that, and they are to a certain degree, I suppose, but ultimately the art style he creates is fabulous, and it never bores me, or it's never kind of uninteresting. He's just a great artist and a great writer, and you can tell when you read it how much he kind of loves crafting this mystery and twisting and turning and giving red herring after red herring and revealing a little bit here but keeping a lot to himself. And it's fabulous, and the cast of characters is far larger, obviously, than Dr. Tenma and Johan. Way larger, in fact. But it'd be pointless me going into them all, because it's a long old series, 400 pages or so each book. There's a lot of pages to go through in the 9 volumes. But my only criticism would be kind of bringing back some of those extra stories, because some of them didn't feel as important or as needed as the others, and some of them may have dragged on longer than others, but I had the same feeling of 20th Century Boys for that. And I suppose it's always going to be the same when you have a diverse cast of characters and a diverse set of storylines going on. When you introduce a new one, you're either going to like it or you're not going to like it, and you want to get back to the other ones. And so it's always going to be the case that it's risky bringing in new and different storylines when you've still got the other storylines to be finished and to be, taken to their culmination. And some of those are far more impactful and far more meaning for me anyway reading than others. And so I would probably, cut this series down to 6 or 7 volumes rather than the 9, to cut out some of those external extra storylines. But again, that's just me personally. Some people probably loved every single character and every single plot thread that was introduced. Ultimately, Monster is a real intriguing crime mystery series. It's following this serial killer who is just almost uncatchable and is so intelligent and so ahead of the game that all the way through it you never feel like he's on the back foot. You always feel like you were following his plan, which makes the stakes a bit higher for you main characters who you were kind of empathising with, who you hope eventually get the better of this maniac. But Dr. Tenma himself is such a selfless guy and such a good guy that you don't want him to be part of that world. You don't want him to end up being a murderer as well. So you've got those two things constantly pulling you forward throughout the series, and it's a great series. It's not my favourite Urasawa work. My favourite Urasawa work is Pluto. But anyway, they are my thoughts on Monster by Naoki Urasawa. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed, and I will catch you on the next one.